minutes in here. We don't want me as a teacher.
Wait, but then if we're using the handheld microphone,
Students were just
that means
getting all
this
set up
guy's
here.
gonna be confused. Because it follows the person depending on where the sound comes from. But if you're using the microphone, the sound will come from here.
Go in your position
Oh.
and say something.
Let me see. Yeah, why don't you go stand there and say something? And we'll
Stand there
see.
and say something.
No, without the microphone.
I think
Say something without, can you pick it up without the microphone?
Yeah.
So I guess it doesn't give the WebEx like, 'cause I don't know if you've seen this in WebEx, but like it kind of does the divided screen thing where it follows the. You see,
it's got it at the top, but it doesn't have.
yeah. So the top is supposed to be like 360, but
Okay.
the one below is supposed to be more focused. Hello.
I can see.
Testing, 1, 2, 3. Testing.
Testing.
It does move over. Did it follow me when I?
It had you over there, and then I was like divided
okay.
into.
Okay.
And I'm gone now. That's okay. Oh, no, there we are.
Yeah. If it can see
Yeah,
and
if
hear
there's
most of
multiple
us in
people.
one area, then it'll stay one screen. But if it was divided, it's gonna try to
Okay,
catch
it's gonna try
multiple.
oh, I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Should he speak into the microphone even though
I think speaking into the microphone would be fine. Just
You
because
still think that would be
Yeah.
the best?
Yeah.
Is that gonna be loud enough for it to pick up?
yeah.
Okay.
Where are the speakers?
Up in the ceiling.
Oh, yeah, that'll still be the best.
Okay.
But then because are we having students in here too?
They're invited,
Okay.
but it's Thursday. We don't have classes on campus on Thursdays, so
So it's gonna be marginal at best.
marginal at best.
Marginal, it's okay. Okay, so Emily was talking and picked her up.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
it is cool to watch it work.
Yes.
Yeah.
So if
What
there's
is
a
this
live
doing?
and interactive
Owl.
environment, this would happen.
It's the owl.
The owl. I told them last night they had Alice.
We had Alice.
We
last
have
night.
Alice too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But this is Alice.
So do we want to restart it, or are we just gonna?
No,
leave it?
it's named appropriately. Yeah, it's not a test meeting.
Oh, okay.
We're live.
We'll just
You like
delete
it?
this part
We're
out.
live right now.
So all of us have to stop teaching.
All right. Yeah, we can delete this part out.
When we look at the recording.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you guys can get going, I guess, whenever you're ready, right? Is that?
Yeah.
Give it one more minute.
Turn this around. Doesn't work.
Okay, so would the questions pop up? on the
It
side?
was on the side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, if here's what we can do. If there's no participants on YouTube, you can go ahead and still go through the presentation
Mhm.
as if there were people in the room. But then we can plant the PowerPoint in there and give you guys that edited version of the video if you guys want that. And we can distribute that to our students as well.
Okay.
In what way would you plant the PowerPoint in there?
Oh, we have video editing software and whatnot. It's easy to do once it's
Okay.
recorded. Yeah.
To make a new recording.
Right.
With,
So
Does
you
that make
just
sense?
Yeah.
Play the
Yeah.
video and then pop the
Yeah,
power screen
yeah.
image up when they're talking
Yeah,
about it.
yeah. We can definitely do that.
Is the time on your end? Is there any way to do it as we go through and that saves you time later? Or do you think it would be valuable to the students who are gonna watch it?
I mean, I'm sure it'll be valuable to students. We have what, 65 UCC?
65 UCC and students.
Yeah, I think something like that. So
Wow,
it'll
that's incredible.
A
Yeah.
lot of them work full-time jobs though, so then that's
Right,
why they can't.
right.
But they're happy to have a video to watch.
Then that would be the best, yeah. Well, Stephen, pretend there are 65 people here in this room and welcome them and give a greeting and go ahead and get started.
Yeah.
And use your voice so
Let's
that this
do it.
thing goes to you.
Yes, come over here. Yes.
And if you have something to say, feel free to jump right in, then the camera can still capture you as well, so you guys don't have to like move around or anything. The
Okay.
camera will follow you.
So, good afternoon. This thing is not focusing on me yet. Good afternoon. My name is Stephen Boyd. I am the Minister for Chaplains and Ministers in Specialized Settings with the national setting of the United Church of Christ. And we're going to be talking to you. Malcolm will be coming on a little bit later. But this afternoon, I'm going to be talking to you about the ordaining calls and four-way covenants and specialized settings and how we can help you out. I usually work with the federal government chaplains and for working with ministers and with committees on ministry for those people who are going into specialized settings. And then for people who are going into hospital chaplaincy, we work with Kathleen Sattler, who is the endorsement secretary who works for those who are getting professional certification for the different chaplaincy programs in the hospitals. So again, that's who I am, a little bit about how I got to where I'm at. I've been a local church pastor for about 24 years. And at the same time, I was a National Guard and Army Reserve chaplain serving in the military, in the Army. So I've been able to operate in both ministerial settings. And as a result, I work with individuals who are trying to do ministry in specialized settings. So I'm going to start this. One of the things that becomes very important is, I hope they're seeing the PowerPoint to go along with this. Is it showing it? Okay. So, is it showing PowerPoint? Because it doesn't look like it's showing it.
Picking up from where the speaker is. So if you lower this, give the thing a new point for your
Okay.
voice
All right.
and then start using it.
Okay. So one of the things that's very important when we're starting to work with individuals is that there's a difference between a covenant and a call agreement. When you start looking at a possibility of a job setting, whereas you've been approved for ordination pending call, you're going to be working with a call agreement, which is the agreement between you and the employer that has to do with the job that you've been asked to call and the remuneration for how you're doing that job. In the 3 and the 4-way covenants, what we're looking at is looking at something a little bit more relational. We're trying to see how you can work with those people to strengthen that ministry, to be better in that ministerial setting, to make it so that everything comes together and works and operates a lot better. So in this case, then, what we're looking at is for a call agreement. This is what we're talking about, and a lot of this has to do with a call agreement for a local church, for example. An individual who's going to be relocating, we would have relocation expenses, the salary, the housing, the annuity, health and dental insurance, Social Security and Medicare offset, life insurance, your weekly schedule of how many hours you would be putting in, how you'd be putting in those hours, your personal time that is allotted, and sabbatical leave. So these would be things that would be important for your call agreement. And the call agreement handbook is a resource that you can use for that. You can get that on UCC resources, and that shows how you can work through the call agreement so that the employer has a better idea of how to designate those certain details. The other thing that's very important about the call agreement handbook that workbook that is important is that you can go ahead and show how it would be dealt with in terms of if it was a 50% call, a 75% call, a quarter time call. All of that is kind of worked out in the agreement in the workbook so that you have a better idea of how to take those parts of your call agreement and work them to tailor them to the call that you're applying for. In the new manual on ministry, what we're looking at now is something that we consider is more of a revitalization and kind of a revisiting of what it means to be a covenantal denomination. United Church of Christ is covenantal. And so what we tried to do when we started working through the new MOM is we started to talk about this whole renewed interest in what it means to be in covenant with the local church, with the Committee on Ministry, and for those individuals who are working in ministry beyond the local setting, the local church setting, what it means to be in covenant and how all these players come together. So it's a covenanted, as a covenanted body, we're talking about bringing the players of this ministerial setting and all who are responsible for the authorization into some sort of relation. And when we talk about this, the one thing that becomes real clear, which is the last part of this bullet, is that the clear communications between all of the players is very important. It's relational, whereas the call agreement is more of responsibilities and the remuneration and how we talk about how you're going to do your job, and it's more of a contractual kind of an understanding. This part we're talking about in terms of establishing lines of support and of care. Especially, sometimes I'm really concerned about our ministers who operate beyond the local church setting. They need to have a good relationship with their local church, so that if they run into situations where they need some sort of support or clarity, then we have the opportunity to work with their local church pastor or with a discernment committee at that local church to be there to be supportive of them, because they may not find that support in the ministerial setting where they're located. So some of the parts of what the covenant is, it is a written agreement. And if you want to take a look at this, you can go onto ucc.org and put into the search engine four-way covenant or three-way covenant, and there will be a link that will take you to the recommended and suggested templates for 3- and 4-way covenants from the MESA team. The most recent edition of that is May of 2015, and that is on there for you to go through. The covenant can be as basic as you want it to be, or it can be as detailed and as whatever else you want to include in that, as you build these relationships between the local church, the ministerial setting, yourself, and the Committee on Ministry. So those templates are available to you. You can go in there, and we also suggest that the Committees on Ministry go into those templates as well to see what they can expect of their members in discernment and their authorized ministers, as their authorized ministers put together covenants for the ministerial settings where they're located. When an authorized ministry, this becomes a part of the ongoing requirement. A suggestion that is in the new manual on ministry is that every authorized minister have either a 3- or a 4-way covenant. A 3-way covenant would be the covenant of a local church minister, and that would be the local church, the minister, and the Committee on Ministry. A 4-way covenant for a minister serving outside the local church would be the ministerial setting, the Committee on Ministry, the minister, and the minister's local church of membership. Always bringing back in that local church of membership. If you start reading into the first sections of the Manual on Ministry, and you look at the theological section, section 1, you find that the two real strong threads that start to weave from that first section and into section 2 are the membership in the local church. And so our local church minister would be a member of that church. Or if you had a 4-way covenant, you would have a local church membership. And then the other part is this covenantal thread of being in relationship, being in support, having oversight and accountability to more than just one part of the covenant, but to all parts of the covenant. So it is a written document. We are suggesting that each of the Committees on Ministry have the covenants on file for all their authorized ministers. And it is the nature of it is to provide for support in order to promote the greater good for the entire ministerial setting. It is fluid, and I think this is one of the things that's one of the most important parts of the covenant, is that whereas the call agreement seems to be more contractual and more deliberate and detailed, with the covenant, it's more fluid. This relational part becomes a part of bringing together how people are in relation to one another. And the part that is, I think, probably the most important in this is if in fact there was something that changed. In the covenant, we can start to work with that. And for example, somebody needs child care, to do child care or elder care, needs to kind of modify how they work within the context of their setting. Another way that's really important is if we have an individual who's doing, who's bivocational, or even doing a combination of two churches, how those two entities work together, or how we establish boundaries for the ministerial setting, as well as with the minister and the congregation themselves. So those are really important. That fluidity is very important. It's obviously, as we put down here, it's not legally enforced, but it's enforced through mutual compromise and discussion. So it's the relational part of this that's really very important in terms of making sure that the best part of all is taking care of the ministerial setting and of the minister. So as we look at the covenant and the ministerial code, we find that in the new manual on ministry, the ministerial code is written now in more of covenantal language. So therefore, the individual minister now covenants with God, with self and family, with the individual's ministry setting, and with all ordained ministers. So this is a whole different way of writing the code of ethics. You will find as you go through this that the guidelines for ministerial oversight and accountability and in the areas of fitness review also start talking about the covenantal aspect of working through the different decisions that have to be made by committees on ministry. So I don't think at this point that we have any questions, but feel free if there's a way to chat in, to ask questions about this. Again, I want to just elaborate that as we go into some of into the covenant, the three-way covenant would be how a local church could be supportive to their minister with the support of a committee on ministry. The covenant of a four-way covenant, the covenantal partners would all be in support, as well as working with the ministerial setting beyond the local church.
Stephen, can you give some examples of four-way covenants that you've seen members in discernment head into and that they were ordained into four-way covenant?
So the covenant, when we talk about that, and thank you, Malcolm, that's going to come up, and we'll start working on that. So when we're working on a four-way covenant, what I've worked with a number of members in discernment is that they are coming to their committees on ministry with settings beyond the local church. And so a lot of the times the oversight and the accountability becomes an issue for the committees on ministry in terms of who is working with this person. Now, for example, if we're looking at a hospice setting, we have hopefully a human resource office that would be working with the chaplain to make sure that they are staying within the guidelines of that setting. What that would do then is the hospice setting, here is their contract or their call agreement for working in this setting, and working through that, we bring it to the Committee on Ministry and then bring in the local church as a partner as well. One of the things that we find is really sometimes difficult, and something that the Committee on Ministry is asked to work on, is that they are wondering where some of the places that the individual does sacramental work in terms of preaching and teaching or doing communion and baptism. Quite often those are not some of those requirements that we would find in a hospital setting or in a hospice setting. Sometimes If a person is going to go into pastoral counseling and do that on their own, there is a question as to where those elements would be found in the call agreement as well as in the covenant. So one of the things that I've suggested when we work on those kinds of things is for the Committee on Ministry to work with the member in discernment to discover other places where we can insert those kinds of requirements and those kinds of duties. For example, I have a four-way covenant in my current position as the person who does this kind of work. I don't have a preaching and teaching responsibility, and I don't have responsibilities to do the sacraments or rites. But however, written into my covenant is the part where I actually support my local church minister and work with my pastor there. So for example, when she is on vacation or she is on study leave, I'm asked to come in and preach. I do visitation for our local church. That's one thing I do. And other things that I do are writing newsletter articles for the newsletter. I submit an annual report of what I've done for the year to be a part of the annual report of the local church. And so part of putting my call together and putting it into the covenant, into the four-way covenant, shows that there's other responsibilities of my ministry that I do in the setting of the local church where I may not be doing it in the ministry setting where I function. One of the questions that we've been really looking at as we've been challenged with the changing landscape is the landscape is changing in terms of what we are doing and what we are seeing in ministry. And so what we're finding is that the calls they take on a different kind of look, a hybrid sometimes of serving a local church while serving as a part-time hospice chaplain or a hospital chaplain. Some of these change and do other kinds of creative work with the covenants. One of the things that Malcolm brought up a long time ago was that the committee needs to look at the sacredness of the call. So we're not looking just at the call in terms of the individual ministry setting necessarily. We're looking at the call of the whole person. But the other thing that we want to be sure to stress here when we start talking with our committees on ministry, and I may bring this up a couple of times, is our ability to talk to what it means to be an authorized minister, to be an ordained minister. So we're not talking about just specifically the call that you are securing to be ordained, but we're also talking about the whole nature of your ministry as an ordained individual. And that's very important as we start talking to committees on ministry. They understand that a person is ordained into ministry in and on behalf of the entire United Church of Christ, where your initial call may be as a local church pastor who knows what happens in 5, 10, 15 years, and that call morphs and changes, and your sense of the Spirit drives you into a different place to do ministry in a different ministry setting. So all along, that covenant will change and go along with you in terms of how you express yourself as an entire ordained individual. We have looked at the individuals in terms of the needs of the church. That's one of the very important parts as we start working with the committees on ministry. They continue to be challenged by, does the church need this ministry? Especially when we're talking about ministry settings that go beyond the local church setting. So we start to work in terms of crafting a call agreement as well as a covenant that can show that indeed the needs of the church are being shown in this call that the individual is expressing. So one of the things that I work directly with is I work with military service and the Army, Navy, and Air Force chaplains. And this is just a little bit of a plug, but we really do need UCC military chaplains. As the demography of our military changes in our nation, we're having more and more challenges for getting more and more progressive denominational representation in the chaplaincy to serve the various people and all the communities within the military. So it's really important if we can do that. And this also, I served as a reserve chaplain for 24 years while I was a local church pastor, and I considered myself bivocational. I ended up working local church and loved that, but at the same time was able to serve soldiers for 24 years, and that was a very rewarding ministry as well. So I'm certain that out there are some creative ideas of what ordainable calls look like, and they become more and more challenging as they become more and more unique. And one of the things that is important to us as we work with the committees on ministry is to make sure that you're working in good conversation with your committee on ministry. Your committee on ministry, if you are a member in discernment, should be seeing you at least once a year. And there should be ongoing conversation, and then it's important also to keep the local church discernment committee working on your behalf as well, to make sure that you are continuing to grow in your ministry, that you're developing and you're proceeding as well, that you're at the pace and with the progress that your committee on ministry would ask that you make along the way. So talking more specifically about the ordainable call, we get to that point in our process where you're approved for ordination pending call, and at this point, then we need the spiritual, the confirmation of ordination as the spiritual sense that the gifts and talents are in you to do the specific ministry, and that you are needed to be authorized, you're needed to be ordained to be in this ministerial setting. This is not only seen by you, and this is not only seen by the Committee on Ministry, but now we've brought in a third party. We've brought in a ministerial setting, either the local church, or we've seen, or we start to see individuals that are being called to chaplain settings in local hospitals, hospice settings. We've also had some that have become chaplains at university and college settings. There's just a wide variety of places where others will sense your call and the need for you to be authorized to do the ministry that they're asking you to do in their setting. So it becomes the work of the member in discernment to be able to create that call, to create that covenant, to show the Committee on Ministry that indeed this is ordainable. This is what you feel that requires authorization to do the ministry in the setting that that you are being called to. This is some of the points that we tried to make in terms of the ordaining call. First and foremost is that it's a call to ministry in and on behalf of the United Church of Christ. We feel that is one of that the needs of the church become foremost and are primary. We want to make sure that the call is covenantal. That's like, it's not that you're just acting on your own. We have other support coming in for you in the times when you may need support and you may need prayers and all those kinds of things, but also there is the system of accountability and support. As we know, each Committee on Ministry has those responsibilities and those requirements for keeping standing on the go, and that you have to maintain boundary training, continuing education, a number of things in different associations to maintain that standing. That's all written into the covenant because that's part of your relationship to the Committee on Ministry to ensure that you are meeting their expectations and their requirements. Again, the ministry responds to the needs of the church, and finally it involves mutuality in ministry. You're not just operating on your own. Quite often we figure that a minister in the local church is the minister, and there needs to be a pastoral relations committee there established for the individual to make sure that there's a place for that individual to go and to share with confidence and with confidentiality. So this all gets written into the covenant so that individuals have not only the committee of ministry is assured that there's accountability and oversight, but the minister, the one who's doing the ministry, has the support and those people in place to support them when in fact they may be in need or something comes up in their life or their family life or spiritual life that requires some discernment. That's always something I think that's really important. I know I just was in a very important conversation with my local minister, I'm on the pastoral relations committee for her, and it was something that was very important, and she needed to talk that over with us, and she had a pastoral relations committee. It's part of the covenant that was there in place for her to be able to come and share this very important conversation. So this relational part continues to be more and more important as we see the demands on ministry become more and more demanding. So it's very important that we have these relations in place. So at the heart of the ordaining call is that the ministerial setting requires the practices of ministry, rites, and sacraments of the church. And these will all be these guidelines that we're kind of starting to go over here. Now I'm going to go over them just very, very lightly, but these will hopefully be soon a part of the new section 3 of the new manual on ministry. These guidelines are the guidelines that we're setting not only for the members in discernment, so that you have some way to start gauging and making sure that your call fits into some of these criteria, but we're also giving guidelines to the committees on ministry to make sure that they have some way of having conversation with you to determine how this ministry that you have decided or that you have secured is going to serve the needs of the whole church. And there are ways to work around this and work into this in terms of bivocational ministry, of working with two separate congregations, the enforcement of good boundaries, all of these things can get worked into this covenant and create a sustainable, ordainable call. The call over, so we have gone back to the whole understanding that there's somewhere that we want you to look at the opportunities to teach and preach the gospel, that the call demonstrates, that your call demonstrates an ongoing commitment to the United Church of Christ. And if you've had any exposure or work with the Marks ministry, Marks are for Effective and Faithful Ministers, you will see that this is a part, this part as being a representative of the United Church of Christ is one of the marks that is serves in conversation with your committee on ministry. That the call serves God and serves the church, engages in mission and outreach. Again, another marks in the faithful and effective marks for faithful and effective ministers. And that you're able to bring in life traditions and stories as you're in conversation with these people and how you work this into your worship and proclamation and your witness. So we continue here just a little bit more, just an oversight of preaches and testifies to the good news. The call appreciates practices and passes on traditions of faith while interpreting them in the light of the context of a diverse and changing world. And the call is within the experiences and the capability and the capacities of the candidate. And to say a little bit about that last one, the call is within the experience, capabilities, and capacities of the candidate. One of the things that we run into every now and then is we run into the fact that somebody has gone into ministry and they are looking at a call that is very unique, and what has propelled them towards that call may be life experiences or a previous profession. And so what we're looking at here on this is that we can't use one size fits all in terms of gearing if the call is ordainable or not. It may be that somebody has had a very good experience in human resources or something like that, and the call that they're feeling themselves called to is of something that's more in that kind of an arena and not necessarily a local church. And so we work with their experiences, we work with their their work experiences, their ongoing history, to determine, and that each call is individual, and that it's not cookie cutter, that it's not just checking off the blocks, that we're in conversation and know that this person can indeed do this work because of their experiences. And we see a little bit of this when we start working with people that are working in the regional theological education programs, where they're taking alternate paths to ordination, and how this goes, works with that in terms of work experience and your working with your seminary education, all these, to bring the whole person together for who are we ordaining as we ordain this person into Christian ministry on behalf of the United Church of Christ. This just kind of states a little bit more of what we've been talking about in terms of general understanding of the call. It demonstrates an understanding of the community. Who have you been called to minister to? It encourages the building of relationships and mutual trust. And a lot of that has to do with the work that you do with the Committee on Ministry, but also branching out into your local environment and your local community in terms of establishing mutuality and support with other clergy, with other ministers. One of the things that has been kind of interesting is that we've been working with individuals that have tried to either go into the areas of spiritual direction or into pastoral counseling. Some of them have tried to do a number of other kind of creative kind of ordainable calls. And one of the things that I've found that has worked quite well, because as we come back to the Committee on Ministry, we realize that the whole concern, one of the concerns, is that accountability. Who is this individual accountable to? If they, for example, are a spiritual director just working out in the local community, who are they accountable to? Who's supporting them? Who's giving them the kind of support that they need? And we've come up with a solution which a number of committees on ministry have really appreciated and have bought into, and it's the creation of kind of a fifth partner a fourth or fifth partner in the covenant. And what we've done is we've taken and asked the MID, or the member in discernment, or the person who's seeking ordination, to create a board of about 4 or 5 people, anywhere from 3 to 5 people, really, of maybe their local church pastor, another a colleague in the same field, for example, maybe 1 or 2 members from the local church that know them real well. And we've created what we termed as a kind of a discernment board for this member as they put this covenant together. And the covenantal responsibility of that board would be to work with the minister on an ongoing basis, say every quarter, meet with that minister, have time for prayer, have time for support and understanding and opportunity to be able to talk and share some of the frustrations they're feeling, as well as kind of the accountability aspect of 4 or 5 people who understand the ministry that this individual is doing. And we found that committees on ministry are feeling very good about this. We've done this probably about 4 or 5 times now, where we've had these boards set up so that it would be the local church of membership, it would be the Committee on Ministry, it would be the members of the minister, and then it would be this board that would serve as another area of accountability and oversight on the minister's ministerial setting, to be able to just kind of check in with that person and make sure that the ministry is going well. And we found that these are working quite well, and we're hoping to do more of them as we get more and more very unique calls coming through our offices. The other thing is that if we have an individual who's got a yoked parish, for example, we need pastoral relations committees in both of those parishes to be there, or both of those congregations to be there for the minister, so that they become now instrumental parts of the covenant. So one of the things, I guess, that I can't stress enough on this whole idea of covenant is that it's very fluid, and it's very you can make it into just about anything you want to make it into, looking at all the different aspects of what you need to put together, especially as your initial call, if we're looking at an ordainable call. So often what we found is that individuals going out for ordination have just kind of taken all the pieces and then hoped that the committee could create a call out of it. What we're seeing now is that with this and with this template and with the guidance, we're able to create the call in this covenant. So that now the person going up for ordination is able to say, this is what I think is ordainable, instead of expecting the committee to sit there and do the hard work. It's really the work of the individual who's going for ordination, saying, this is what I think will work, and do you think that this would work for my ordination? So it's changed the dynamic completely, and I think all for the better. So that's why this covenant aspect of the new manual on ministry and all the guidance that we're trying to give and feeding in the new language and everything else and working with the traditional membership in the local church and all the covenantal understandings and how these relationships work, I think you can go to the committee on ministry much better prepared to support what you think is going to be an ordainable call. So I think that that's an important part of what we're doing here when we work with these covenants. And this is just, again, what I was just talking about in terms of variations. If in fact, for example, you don't have a preaching and teaching responsibility or sacraments and rites, then place it in your local church of membership. Get a little bit more relational with your local church of membership, with your local church pastor. Come on, and you're not necessarily paid staff, but you have more of a responsibility there that you can maybe do some of the ministerial work that you wouldn't necessarily do in the setting where you're seeing your ministry being done. A lot of the times, for example, also, I know of a couple of instances where individuals have worked kind of in the area of outreach and mission and something that's a little bit more out there, but their local church of membership will take them on as an outreach ministry and claim the person and that ministry as being supported and authorized by that local church. So that local church of membership, which, like I said, in section 1, we've really tried to bring that more and more clear as part of this covenant. That local church of membership can do a lot to secure certain parts of your covenant that will give you the opportunity to do some ministry that may be a little bit more unique and a little bit more challenging if you've got a good, steadfast relationship with your local church. So that's very important. The other thing is that we did one in particular. It was a number of years ago now, but she was a woman. A committee on ministry wanted to ordain her so badly. And the problem was that she was going to she was actually going to be the director. She had a doctorate and all, and she was going to go and be the program director for a Catholic retirement facility. And she was very well qualified to do that job. The only thing is in that setting, she would probably not be preaching or teaching, and she wouldn't be doing rites and sacraments. So this was an example where she really made an intentional relationship with her local church of membership to be able to do some of those kinds of things that defined her as a minister, so that she could go doing the ministry that she wanted to do in that other setting. So that's how we can make this covenant work for each of you. Another one that we had that was very unique was a person got ordained on 2 part-time on-call positions as a chaplain in a civilian hospital. And so when the covenant came together, it was a 5-way covenant, and the 2 hospitals actually described for the committee how often they had used this individual, and said that there was not going to be any change in the hours that she was going to be used. So they each became 2 other partners in this covenant, and then she put that whole covenant together, and they ordained her to that position, to those positions. After about a year, she actually got a call as a full-time staff position, as a chaplain at one of those hospitals. She became board certified, and she was also then, because she was ordained, she was able to go in and become a reserve Army chaplain as well. So these covenants can work well to create some very some great opportunities for doing ministry that does not necessarily fit into the description that our committees on ministry have been used to working with. This kind of just just restates some of what I just stated. The bottom there, though, is kind of important. Quite often we get a fourth party. One in particular is the Veterans Administration. Veterans Administration will not sign a four-way covenant. They have problems in discerning between contract and covenant. And so they'll look at this and think that it's a contract when in fact it is a covenant, it is not contractual. But they declined, a number of hospitals have declined as well. And my recommendation to the member of discernment or the person who's going towards ordination is to simply state that go ahead and get a good detailed job description, have it signed off by somebody in the HR department, and insert that as the fourth partner in the covenant. And that just simply states that these are your responsibilities to that partner, to the hospital or the hospice or wherever that ministerial setting is. And then they become a fourth part of the covenant, even though we have not asked that they actually go ahead and sign the covenant. There's conversation in the committees on ministry, each by each, because this is a decision that will be made by each individual committee on ministry on whether to maintain standing. A individual needs to have an authorizable call, and that is that, like I said, is being decided committee by committee. And some committees are saying that in order to maintain standing, you must have an authorizable call, and others have said not necessarily. In any event, the committees on ministry need to discern with you that in fact you are still doing ministry in a setting or in an arena where you can maintain standing and actually be considered a minister with good standing. One of the things that we need to look at in that with that subject, though, is the whole thing of leave of absence is considered an authorizable standing, so that you can maintain standing on leave of absence. And the recommendation in the new manual is up to 7 years. There's a new standing for that we're looking at to make sure that in maintaining that standing, you're also maintaining the responsibilities in covenant with your committee on ministry. So if there are in fact other requirements such as CPE continuing education or boundary training and those kinds of things, those would be decided committee by committee. I want to go into endorsement for just a moment.
We'll probably do that a different way with a different recording.
Do you think so?
Because there's no one asking questions, so I'm not sure with endorsement.
Okay. So at this point, I think we'll just, yeah. Okay, so I think at this point, we're just going to conclude this with the whole conversation about covenant and ordainable calls. Again, my name is Stephen Boyd. You can get me on ucc.org and get my contact information, and I'd be more than glad to work with you on any unique kind of covenants that you may be considering. Thank you.